Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. They've waited for decades, in grief, in anger and sometimes in silence. But today the relatives of those who died from infected blood products had something else: hope, as an inquiry into what went wrong finally opened. In the 70s and 80s, blood contaminated with HIV and hepatitis C was given to patients with haemophilia and other conditions. More than 2,000 people were killed. It could take years for the inquiry to reveal the full picture. Today, it opened with remembrance and the chance for some of those affected to be heard at last. Our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman, reports.
They came in their hundreds, in the red of the contaminated blood that has devastated thousands of lives, for a public inquiry into what has been described as the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. These are the faces of just some of the victims, from a montage shown to the packed hearing, among the 4,500 men, women and children who were given infected blood products.
I was infected in 1974, aged 11. I had multiple blood transfusions, 19 of them. One of them contained the Hep C virus.
I'm a widow of a severe haemophiliac who died of AIDS in 1994.
We lost our granddad as a consequence of contracting HIV from the use of blood products.
This was his last Christmas. You can see sort of how poorly he is there.
Colin Smith was 7 when he passed away. Cheeky, daring and full of mischief until the end, when he died in his mother's arms, weighing less than a stone.
Been quite a few times that you just want to give up. But I've got 3 other children, I can't do that. I've got grandchildren now, I can't do that. But sometimes you just like to go to bed and not wake up, because I'd like to see him again.
Colin was infected with hepatitis C and HIV when he was 10 months old through blood products used to treat his haemophilia. The heartache of his suffering made worse for his loved ones by the stigma of his condition.
We were known as the AIDS family. We had AIDS dead painted on the side of the house. There was AIDS scratched into the bonnet of the car. I was unemployable because of the AIDS, HIV rather. I did get a second job, but the day I was due to start, the boss in charge came up and said, I can't start you because people have found out, and he was scared of losing customers.
But Colin's family lost so much more. Their car-mad little boy, whose toys rest on his grave, left behind 3 brothers and a hole that can't be filled. They can't fight for his life. They can fight for truth from authorities.
We've had it said to us, oh, for God's sake, you know, it's been 27 years for you, you know, let it go. But you can't let something like this go. You need answers.
Our lot just buried the evidence, and now it's coming to light. So hopefully they'll shake it in their boots a bit like we had over the last 27 years.
This is not the first inquiry into contaminated blood, but it is the first with teeth, the power to compel witnesses to testify. First, it will look at how the unthinkable was able to happen, why so many people were infected. But it will go further. It will look at the government response, what they did, and whether there was a cover-up. The inquiry is being chaired by former High Court Judge Sir Brian Langstaff, who today pledged to put people at its heart.
I want an apology. You know, I want them to say they did it, you know, because there's none of that. You know, it's always, oh, it wasn't us.
It's not just the deaths that it stops at, it's the knock-on effect of the rippling effect of all the families and everyone having to sort of pick up the pieces and sort of continue with their lives.
The consequences of this catastrophe are still becoming clear, and this devastating death toll will only go up as the inquiry continues.
Well, there are many questions the families of those who died want answered, as Tessa said. Perhaps the biggest and most important is this: what did the authorities know while the scandal was going on? Our health correspondent Catherine Jones looks into claims of a cover-up.
So many have already died. But among those still living with serious illness, what sustains their sense of burning injustice are their suspicions about the government's handling of this scandal. On behalf of the victims, today the man leading the inquiry promised to uncover anything there is to be found.
It will be as open and transparent as it is legally possible to be. It will be independent of government and frightened of no one in the conclusions it draws.
It was in the late 60s that a new blood-clotting agent called Factor VIII revolutionised the lives of people with haemophilia, a simple injection helping protect them from bleeding to death from a cut or a bruise.
The UK hadn't the capacity to keep up with the demand for Factor VIII. So in 1972, with the government's approval, the NHS began importing it from the USA. But the firms making those supplies were buying the blood from prisoners, sex workers and drug addicts, groups at high risk of carrying infectious disease.
As early as 1975, the government received clear warnings there was a risk of people catching hepatitis. By 1983, the risk of contracting the newly discovered AIDS virus was also known, and finally action began to be taken to make supplies safer. But it wasn't until 1990 that the government started notifying victims, and every government since has refused a public inquiry until last year. Theresa May ordered this one.
There was a major cover-up, in my view. People's medical records amended, people treated without their consent, people with a positive diagnosis not told for years, and all of the knock-on effects that could have. So major wrongs were done here, and I hope this inquiry will finally give people the truth and also a degree of justice.
The Scottish Government did commission an inquiry in 2009. This was the angry response from campaigners when it was published 6 years later without holding anyone to account. A court has awarded some of the victims who contracted HIV £20,000 compensation. Everyone else has had to apply to specially set up charities funded by the government.
If you're a victim, you can go along to those charities and you can beg, literally beg for money. A lot of families have been begging for money for 30 or 40 years. It's ruined their lives.
Graham has lived with hepatitis C for almost 40 years. After answers from the inquiry, he wants promises from the government.
This can never ever happen again in this country, and we can't have a situation where governments or other people are lying to save their own skins at the expense of people's lives.
It's expected to take at least 2.5 years to establish exactly what did create the health service's worst ever scandal. Only then will it finally become clear if anyone can be held accountable. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Tessa's with me now. Another 2.5 years to wait, Tessa, and they've waited decades. Are the families confident they will finally get the answers they've been looking for?
It goes without saying, Sian, that they wish all of this had happened years and years earlier. But I think it's fair to say now it is. They appreciate the scope and they are pleased with the scale as well. To give you some idea, they already have 100,000 documents to be looking through. They are expecting more to come. There are going to be 1,000 core participants. That's more than any other public inquiry in history. And I think people understand the length because they really want some scrutiny. I was really struck by something that Colin's dad told me when I spoke to him. He said, I try now not to dwell on what we've lost. I try to remember, Colin, and appreciate the 7 years we had and how he fought right till the end. He said, we're going to continue doing that now.
Tessa, thank you.